Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm with my co-host, Dr. Joanna Richey. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Fresh off a trip to DC, House of Delegates meeting. It was very optimistic. Doing great.
Yeah, it was a very fun experience. So, more to come in that regard. Some teasers that will be coming out, or maybe they've already come out, depending on when we release this episode.
Oh, that's a good point. All right. Well, hey, we have a phenomenal episode today. We've got some young practitioners that are in fellowship, and we're referencing them as the power couple. They're doing fellowships in a long-distance relationship. I'd like to introduce Dr. John Nigro and Dr. Mary Brandt. Welcome to Dean's Chat.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. We're pretty informal, and if it's all right with you, let's go first names. John, Mary, Joanna, and Jeff.
Perfect.
Of course.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well, we're really excited to interview both of you. We've had interviews with with one of your fellowship directors. The other one we are trying to figure out alignment of dates on, but one that I know actually quite well from being in the Northern California region. But I'd love to start with a little introduction for each of you. So Mary, you're currently a fellow at the WVU Medicine Wheeling Hospital in West Virginia under the direction of Dr. Mark Hofbauer, who is a former guest of the show and also one of my favorite people maybe on the planet, but he's just the nicest human being. He's just a gem. And he's technically excellent, which is really wonderful when those things go together. And John, you're currently a fellow with Tri Valley Orthopedics in Pleasonton, California, with one of my other favorite people, Dr. Shannon Rush. Can you talk a little bit about why you made the decisions to go into fellowship? And we will go through your careers in terms of school and actually, you know what? I'm going to go through your school real quick because some of that probably has relevance to fellowship stuff. So before I get ahead of myself, you both graduated from Des Moines University for your degree in podiatric medicine, doctorate degree, and you had different undergraduate degrees, but there were some similarities looking at your majors. So Mary, you graduated from the University of Northern Iowa, and John, you graduated from Allegheny College. So can you talk a little bit about, we'll start with fellowship and maybe we'll work backwards.
Oh,
Mary, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think both of us, as far as why we did fellowship, I know we'll get into we did residency at West Penn, and I think we both would say that we felt pretty good coming out of residency. Like for the most part, I think we could, go on and do things we wanted to do, but it was just getting that extra little specialization in different areas, getting more training in specific things. And then I think the biggest thing was what we wanted to do after, and being involved in like a hospital system and going back to the residency. I think a lot of hospital systems now look for fellowship trained physicians so that you're competitive, especially with kind of the world of orthopedics. I don't know, John, if you want to expand on that
to kind of piggyback off that, I think it was also a part of the culture that was at West Penn. Dr. Gatan's really kind of advocates for fellowships. We have 3 years, we're already dedicating to our surgical residency. What's another year to kind of separate yourself a little bit further from some of the competition that may be out there afterwards. And generally, like the classes above Mary and I, they all went and did fellowships and they all had great experiences. They're all great, physicians now practicing. So just to see them kind of go through the process, I think that's what made sense for both of us. We're also pretty competitive people. So I think that's another tie into why we kind of wanted to do a fellowship.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Well, you also grew up podiatry, John. It was in your genes.
Yeah, some say I couldn't get away from it. Just to elaborate on that a little bit, both my parents are foot and ankle doctors, Jeff and Nikki, and they work with my first cousin, Dr. Jesse Meidinger, and they have a private practice in kind of the North Hills of Pittsburgh area. So I definitely grew up around it. I won't say my parents came home and we talked about bunions at dinner. But the idea of going into podiatry has always kind of been in the back of my mind. I knew with like kind of a sports background, I wanted to help people that had sports injuries. So that kind of led to an interest in medicine and kind of just narrowed it down to like, okay, I can see myself, practicing podiatry.
And Mary, you married into the podiatry family.
I did. A lot of people ask me, did I go for John right away knowing what I was getting into, but I had no idea.
And Mary,
Go ahead,
you were
Jen.
also an athlete. Your sport was soccer, and John, your sport was football. Can you guys talk a little bit? You said you're both very competitive. Is that some of the college athlete in you, or?
Oh yeah. I think John's experience that even with my family, I'm like one of five and we all played college athletics. And so just coming from a very athletic background, I didn't have any like family members really in medicine or in podiatry, but it was all like sports injury related that kind of got me into it. And so I think if you ask a bunch of our co-residents, John and I, we can scrub together, but we do get pretty competitive with each other. So it's a fun thing.
Yeah, I think Dr. Catanzariti may have been a little bit happy that we graduated. It wasn't anything serious, but the little competitive, comments come here and there if we scrubbed a case together.
It makes you better though.
It was all in good fun.
Yeah.
Competitive edge. Joe, do you mind if I go backwards just a little bit more? Because I'm curious about you both enroll in podiatry school in Des Moines. You're in Des Moines, Iowa. And what was your class? 50 students or so? 40, 50?
Mm-hmm.
I think we started with like 50 or 52 or something.
Yeah.
All right. So at what point in time did you two, you're studying hard, you're thinking about, trying to get straight A's because you're very competitive. At what point did you start thinking, hey, I kind of like him or her?
Well, I think we kind of owe some of that to Avery Basin, who's another fellowship. He's going through his fellowship right now in Nebraska right now, but I think he kind of reached out to me alongside Mary, and we kind of studied, together initially, and then the Iowa State Fair is obviously very big in Iowa, so I think that was like our first kind of collective hangout as a group, and then.
But it was like the first month of school, like the first couple weeks. So it was pretty quick. Yeah. We ended up having some people that we knew in common. It's a whole story. It gets into a small world, but basically my kind of mentor, her name's Erica Evans, but she went to West Penn, and my family watched her daughter while she was going to podiatry school and went out to West Penn. And she's from Des Moines as well. And so she knew John's parents, trained with John's parents. And then John and I both knew Mike Lee, who's in Des Moines. And so it all was just like this small world connection, just random, but yeah.
Man, that's outstanding. Isn't it? It really is remarkable too. It's a small profession, but then it's also, 7 degrees of separation. Sometimes that really starts to narrow, and it's like, oh my goodness, so-and-so. And that's a really interesting alignment of prior past histories and.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a pretty big coincidence, but I think it was all kind of meant to be.
For sure.
Everything.
So what was it like in school? I mean, the first 2 years easy, you study and you take tests, but then you start going on clinical rotations and you start planning clerkship opportunities, and you got to coordinate because it's just not you, right? Or when did you get married? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that part.
We got married in our second year of residency, so we kind of had a longer dating period, if so to speak, and then we got engaged at like kind of right at the end of school,
like the week before graduation. So then, really? And then we just slowly planned out our wedding over the first kind of 2 years of residency. So
especially to try and get married, as 2 first-year residents, I actually have the time off to plan it first off and then do it. It would have been really difficult.
And the wedding was in Iowa, and we were in residency in Pittsburgh, so that was a lot, but made it work.
Absolutely.
She did all the
planning
work.
a wedding is. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying she did all the work.
Well, and planning a wedding is stressful. Not to mention being a resident is stressful. And certainly we've had students and they always ask, like, oh, well, when's the best time to get married? Or like, how do you figure these things out? What would your advice to them on some of those kind of issues be?
It's a good question. Mary, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I was lucky I had a lot of help from my mom and my family, or both of our families. And so I think that helped a lot, spreading it out. I think it's just finding the best time. Honestly, looking back, second year was probably busier than first year. And so we were like, oh, we don't want to take time off first year. But I think second year probably was even worse. I mean, I don't know if I took a day off all of first year because I was saving up my time for our wedding just to we didn't even take a week off for our wedding. So we didn't go on like a honeymoon, anything like that, but it was fun. A lot of our attendings and co-residents came to Iowa for it and everything. So it was a big celebration. So it was fun.
That's wonderful. So then question, didn't take a honeymoon right after, which is not really a big deal. Did you take one when you graduated, or do you have plans to do one when you graduate fellowship?
Yeah, so we went to Italy for like, I think 12 days after we graduated residency. It was
And
awesome.
right before fellowship. So we kind of
Yeah.
squeezed it in there.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
It was like
Yeah,
a
it was
double
awesome.
celebration.
So
I love that.
not to derail the conversation, but where did you go in Italy?
Well, we started in Rome for 3 days, and then we took a train over to Florence, and then kind of like the Tuscany area after that. And then we went down to Sorrento and Amalfi and Positano. So we spent, I think, 5 days on the Amalfi Coast. It was incredible. It's probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to.
Oh, that's so fabulous. All right, Joe, what's the next
Yeah, no,
step
that
here?
is fabulous. And it, like, my brain instantly starts to go to all things Italy, but we're going to refocus because you guys have a really outstanding career. So met in podiatry school in Des Moines. You guys both went through education. When you were planning externships, how did you just think about that? Were you guys looking specifically to try to match residency in the same place? How did you approach that?
We were. So we actually reached out to a bunch of mentors to kind of like find good programs. And then I think we were in a very lucky situation that we applied to a lot of the same programs, and they kind of knew that we were dating, or just through connections that we had in the profession, and were able to rotate at a lot of the same ones. I think there were maybe 2 months that we weren't together. And if we did, some of them we might have, all of our rotations got messed up because it was 2020. And so like our first 2 or 3 months got canceled and moved around. We also did our core together at West Penn, which is 3 months. And then we ended up getting to do an extra month at West Penn in the spring before that, because one of our other rotations canceled with COVID. So it was kind of all over the place, but I would say we did majority together.
Yeah, I think there was just 1 or 2 that we didn't end up doing at the same time, or we went consecutively. But like she said, we asked a bunch of mentors. Sean Grambart, who's still at the university, was a big help. And then just asking, the West Penn alumnus is a great resource. So asking, Mike Lee and Jordan Grossman and Chris Reeves and people like that, what's the best fit out there and what are some of the best programs to go to. And I think when we were looking, we kind of stayed towards the eastern side of the states. Originally, prior to COVID canceling some of them, I was going to go to down to Texas and then also Denver, but those kind of got wiped out with COVID.
And our one in Milwaukee got canceled. We were supposed to go there at 2 different months, but for the most part, like we were in Orlando together. We went to Inova in Virginia together. We went to one in Ohio together. So a lot of the same, we were there together. So they kind of knew we were a little bit of a package deal, but we were still open if we had to go to 2 different programs, but wanted to be kind of relatively in the same area.
Sure.
So I'll ask the question now. What point during the residency program did you decide you wanted to take that extra step to do fellowships, and then the potential to, and not even being geographically together? I mean, a lot of dynamics going on there. How'd that play out?
I think we both knew that we wanted to do fellowship pretty early on, and we started looking at them like during our second year. And I know we both initially looked at ones in the same area, and we're pretty actually set in the beginning of finding ones that took 2 fellows and going to the same one. But a lot of people advised us not to, especially going back to work at the same practice or the same area. They said two different, views of training after both being trained at West Penn would bring in just two different outlooks, things like that. And then also just like the competitive side of us, and we're not competing for cases, things like that. So we were given two great opportunities then that happened to be, across the country. And at first we weren't thrilled about it, but I will say, like, now, I mean, the year goes by so fast, and we get to see each other now at least once a month at different like fellows courses, which help a lot. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, John, but.
Yeah, so I guess it started out pretty early in residency. Like I said, Dr. Katanes really advocates for that, and just the culture of that kind of drove us to look at, fellowships early on. If I had to say to any students or residents, I would start looking ahead as early as possible. Definitely ask your upperclassmen, mentors that I would say probably towards the end of your first year is when I would start looking, because it seems like the application keeps getting moved forward,
Yeah, earlier and earlier.
So I would really make sure that you're up to date on like when the applications are due, deadlines, because they're, for the most part, I would say not all at the same time. So I would just kind of be on top of that on which programs you want to look at and when the application is actually due, when to visit and things like that.
I think that's great advice. And, you brought up a really good point, Mary, when you had said, you got some really good mentorship where your, faculty had kind of said, you guys are going to go into practice together. If you kind of, everything is taught and learned the same way, you do everything the same way, you don't get to, enhance each other as much as having different perspectives. Do you find at this level, because you guys are now, I mean, it's still a little early, but not too far off from graduating from your fellowship programs, are you finding that you're gravitating to similar types of surgery? Or are you already starting to realize, ooh, I'm really interested in this realm or in this realm? We'll start with you, Mary.
I think pretty much the same for the most part. I think we both, coming out of West Penn, want to do a lot of like trauma, hindfoot, like reconstruction, total ankles. I think we both want to do a lot with that. I think right now in residency, we're getting two different aspects of him being in Northern California and I'm being in West Virginia, just two very different patient populations, that's for sure. But I don't know, John, if you want to.
Yeah, so I think the patient population is a good point. I think we have in the practice out here maybe 5 diabetic patients, and I think their average like A1C is probably like 6.4. So everybody's, generally pretty healthy. Everybody's very active. Just with the lifestyle out here and the weather, I think people get out and exercise more. They're more health conscious, and it's kind of funny. Not to jump too far ahead, but I run my own clinic some of the days of the week, and if I have a new patient on there, they're already coming in knowing about me. They already researched me, so I think that they kind of take more control of their health in this area is what I've kind of noticed, and that therefore leads to more elective cases that you're able to do, and ankle replacement versus a fusion. Everybody wants to remain active, so I think that's why we get a lot of orthopedic, true sports medicine in this region.
But he'll be in shock once he comes back to Pittsburgh. So
I know it's waiting for me. That's okay. I'll do it all.
And you don't have to put the cart too far ahead of the horse. So you mentioned going back to Pittsburgh. Have you guys already secured locations, opportunities, or you're in the process right now?
So we're both going to be in Pittsburgh. We're going to be both involved with the residency program at West Penn. I don't want to get too far ahead. Just contractually, I don't know what's allowed to be said, but that's the plan. So we're at least set on the location right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. And what a absolute gift to be able to bring the skills and the strengths that you will each have and continue to share them in your alumni. I think that's really outstanding.
Yeah,
what are your
forward
thoughts,
to getting
Jeff?
back.
I was thinking that you need another like second honeymoon when you graduate from your fellowship before you start working.
Well, we kind of get one, thanks to
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. One of my best friends from college is getting married, and he decided to get married outside of Venice.
Oh,
So
there
we're
you
going
go.
back to Italy.
In August.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And we did not talk beforehand about that.
Yeah.
Good for
We
you
were
guys.
just talking about that. Jeff and I were just talking about Venice. So, and that wasn't originally in your loop from Italy. So that's really exciting.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're going to stick to the northern part of Italy this time. So get a little different perspective. It'll be a lot of fun.
Very
Yeah,
good.
that's awesome.
Joe, now maybe I'll take us a little different direction. I'm always curious about the fellowship experience. My personal preference is if you have an opportunity to get more training, go for it. You're never going to regret that, right? But there's lots of different reasons people do fellowships, and there's, I've heard even this weekend, Joe, I'm trying to think of Dr. Ng said he thinks that his fellows, once they finish, their 5 years vaulted forward in their career in terms of their expertise and their surgical skills. What are your thoughts about that? Who should be doing fellowships, or who? That's not the right question. What are the benefits of doing fellowships, and then the pros and cons? Let's go that way. Mary, do you mind starting?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole, like you said, argument. I think initially when fellowships were started, who should be doing them and all of that. And now obviously they're pretty competitive and who gets them. But I think that if not, it's more reps and doing different things. I'm seeing different things. I mean, obviously with Dr. Hofbauer, I also work hand in hand with Dr. Burns, who was on, I know, the podcast recently. So just seeing a different view or different outlooks on surgery outside of residency. But then I think during residency, you're so focused on doing the cases, kind of learning all the surgical skills. And I think during fellowship, you kind of take a step back and you're like, how would I work this patient up? How would I follow it through? The billing and coding is actually huge. And so just, it's more of a realistic, like, oh, okay, I'm out starting practice, but I still have someone here to kind of oversee me a little bit. And I think that makes a huge difference. I think really the only con that I can even think of is, sure, you're not getting maybe paid as much as if you were to go out and practice right away, but I think it's worth it in the long run. I know there's been studies on that and showing that you sometimes get paid more in the end, but John, I don't know if you have anything to.
So, I mean, definitely different perspective out here on the West Coast. Like I said, it's a lot more sports medicine. The probably only thing that we don't get a lot of is, Charcot reconstruction, and we don't do any wound care or anything like that, but we get a mix of different orthopedic injuries, ankle fractures, rear foot reconstruction, total ankles, pretty much everything you could think of, we do out here. What's nice about being in a fellowship is that I'm in a kind of like a multi-specialty group, and it's, privately owned. So I'm able to use with Dr. Rush, any type of hardware that we kind of want, rather than a hospital kind of, leading you towards, one company or another. So getting different exposure to different types of hardware, I think, is also helpful. Certainly with billing and coding, that's also a big component to it, how to code and, what you can't bill together and things like that. And then as well as seeing the patient from, start to finish is something that we don't get all the time in residency. I think seeing your post-ops, serially every, a few weeks is really helpful to see, okay, what do I expect to see on the radiograph at this visit compared to, 6 weeks down? When can I weight bear and things like that? It kind of helps you get a process, kind of develop your own protocol post-operatively, how you're going to manage these patients.
And that's one of the big questions we get from students looking at fellowship too, is even just, are we submitting cases for boards and things like that? And I think that's something when you're looking at fellowships, you really have to ask around about if that's something you want to do. I don't know that I would necessarily advise that you need to be worried about that. But for John's example, he's in the private practice group, was kind of hired on as a physician there as if he were on his own, but he's in a fellowship, whereas I'm in a big hospital group or in a university that has residents. So it's a little bit different. The cases aren't under my name. And even with John, I think they're more so under Dr. Rush. But unless you're going to a fellowship where that you're putting cases on under your name, you can't be obviously logging them. And then you're advised to have a year follow-up. So there's a lot of complications with trying to trying to do that. But I know that's one of the most common questions we get from students a lot. So
Kind of piggyback on that. I don't think that's something that you need to be entirely worried about is, getting your numbers. Use your fellowship to, get another perspective on things, have another mentor in the field, get, more training, develop your skills. I think that's kind of the focus of what a fellowship should be, rather than like, oh my God, I have to worry about my numbers now and boards.
yeah.
I think that'll just come with time. You just got to be patient with it and trust the process. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective. We've heard some fellowship directors talk about the idea of it's finessing the skills that you have more than creating a new skill necessarily or building a new skill, but really helping the fellows fine tune and finesse what you already have. And before we totally transition and hear a word from our sponsors, I have one more question for you. It's been interesting. Jeff and I have been talking about some of the things that are challenging for that first year in practice aren't necessarily the technical parts of what we do. It's so much more the relationship part, the soft skills, the communications. What has your experience been hearing these experts have difficult conversations, or the way they're explaining, what patients are signing up for? What's been your experience having that opportunity as a fellow? Mary, we'll start again. You're on this side, Mary. So we'll start with Mary. We kind of went down the line.
Okay.
No, I think, we saw a lot of that too in residency. And I think our residency, luckily, we were able to get a good balance of surgery and clinic. And I think a lot of residencies, though, if you're just thrown into a lot of surgery, not clinic, and don't get that, then it's huge to have that, to kind of have a little bit of follow-up, see the conversations that are being had. And I even find myself now like listening, or if I'm going in a room talking to a patient, I'll rephrase things just like Dr. Hofbauer, just like Dr. Burns did. So you kind of get those little sayings in your head that they say to patients, things like that. So I think it's just more and more experience and hearing different views from more and more physicians, I guess I would say.
Yeah. How about you, John?
Yeah, I think one of the best things Dr. Rush is able to do is he's able to have those hard conversations, whether it's, a patient that comes in to us, having had multiple surgeries, what are their available options? Maybe there aren't any. That's a kind of tough thing to hear as a patient, that you kind of have run your course already. And the way he's able to navigate that is, very impressive to watch. And then also, nobody's perfect. So you have postoperative complications come in, and how to manage that, how to manage expectations with surgery. So it's been very helpful to see him, how he sits down with the patient and kind of discusses those tough subjects.
Yeah.
And I think that's something this year I've taken a big note on too, is just like those moments when something does go wrong and you're like, okay, what would I do next year? And then just trying to remember that, or even just taking notes on how things are done. Because that's just something that you kind of think about during residency, but it kind of gets skipped over at times as well. So.
Yeah, because again, I would imagine, like, I did not do a fellowship, but certainly in my residency program, by the time I got into my third year, the things that you start to really appreciate of, I technically know how to do the steps of a procedure. I feel very comfortable doing this surgery. But to your point, Mary, I have a patient now that came in, they have a complication. How do we have this conversation about what we do next? How do I do this in an empathetic way? Or to your point, John, you don't have any more options. How do I listen to my patients and their perspectives, but still help set up appropriate expectations? And those are important skills. And without having someone to kind of model that behavior after in the beginning, that's really challenging to navigate on your own. So I would imagine, again, that a fellowship could be such a wonderful opportunity to continue to finesse the skill part, the technical part, but also really help you with all of the other things that maybe you didn't realize you didn't pay attention to as a resident because you're so focused on all the resident stuff. But really, to your point, Mary, like, all right, next year, this is me. How am I going to do this? So I think that was very astute, that both of you are kind of looking at it from that lens or perspective. What are your thoughts,
Experience
Jeff?
plays a part in that.
Yeah.
Experience, like just going, getting progressively, through your training, I think it opens your eyes to, like you said, different, nuances that you probably didn't notice before.
Yeah.
You know, I'll dive into this a little more with you, but let's do a shout out to our sponsor real quick for Bako
Yeah, absolutely.
Diagnostics. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Bako Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. It's always good to shout out the companies that support us in students, as residents, as practitioners. So we love to give a shout out to Bako. Can I dive into that discussion a little bit about the pearls and the wisdom of working with experienced docs? I have a question for you. There's that competence confidence equation, and we talk about this a lot, you know, even with students when you're first learning. And but I can't figure out if it's a 50-50 equation or if it's 75-25 either direction. What are your thoughts on competence and confidence going hand in hand? John.
So I think confidence comes with reps and seeing things over and over again. Sorry, you said confidence and competence. Yeah, I think that they certainly go hand in hand. I think just the more reps that you do and the more patients that you see, that both of those you'll see kind of progressively elevate together is how I kind of visualize it. And you could take it back to any type of practice, whether it's sports, you know, the more you mentally prepare for something, for a game or whatever, the more confident you're going to be going into it. And therefore, when you feel confident, you play confident.
Absolutely. Mary, same?
No, I completely agree. I think, like I said, coming out of residency, we felt like we had good reps. We felt pretty confident, I think, for most things like going into it. But then you get to something in fellowship and you're really thinking about, okay, I'm going to be on my own next year. And you start to get to certain cases where you're like, okay, I should probably just hone in on specific things in this and just kind of take notes. Even logging cases this year, like if there's specifics about the case, I try to take notes on, or like what we use, what we did specifically. I think just honing in on those things. I think you definitely need to have a little bit of confidence to go in and do the things that we do. And but I think getting out into practice on your own really kind of shakes that up a little bit. So
absolutely. My only follow-up to that question is, if you were to take a snapshot of you last July 1st and a snapshot of you today, we pretty much discussed the differences, but you certainly, it sounds to me like your fellowship opportunities have been invaluable, outstanding.
Yeah, I think not just from a surgical standpoint, but also a mentorship, you know, aspect, you know, having somebody that you can, you know, rely on down the road if you have questions or if you want to get involved in research or, you know, speaking or lecturing. I think having another, you know, person involved in that is super helpful. But
yeah, I know that I
I
could.
think that I've, you know, jumped over the last, I don't know how many months it's been, but 7 months
Yeah.
or so.
No, and
Joe,
I was
I
just
could
going
keep
to say, I
asking.
think knowing that you could call any of the attendings at any point, if I was booking a case next year and had a question, I would be calling them up, or, you know, just having that mentor.
Yeah, that mentorship experience isn't for a year. That mentorship experience is for a lifetime. So how do you put value on it, right? That's incredible opportunities. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you guys have really covered that really well. And to that last point of, you know, one of the true values of the kinds of fellowships that both of you are in, there are, you certainly have some other attendings that you get to work with, but they are still very focused with one doc, one expert who you get most of that experience with. And that kind of mentorship, that kind of relationship is so valuable because, again, as a resident, it's wonderful to see things lots of different ways with lots of different people, because you learn, you know, nuance and technique and things that you like, or, you know, those little pearls of surgery. But once you get that technical skill, now it's really fine tuning all of the things about each of those and getting your rapport down, how you want to say something, how you want to describe something. And so having that kind of one-on-one relationship is a very different experience than what most residencies offer. So I don't think I have too much more to add. I'd love to shift gears though, if we're at a gear shifting. We had touched on that you were both athletes. I have a huge fascination with the mentality of sports psychology and how much that relates to surgeons. I'm curious, John, you were a quarterback for your football team, and Mary, you were not only a soccer player, but also were Iowa Rush Soccer Club coach. And you also did some commentary analysis for ESPN. I'd love to get both of your take on the skills that you learned young as an athlete and how you feel like they do help you in the world of stress and surgery and peak performance. So this time we'll start with you, John, since I've continued to lean toward my right bias.
Sure. I think one of the best things about sports is it teaches you work ethic from very early on. And that's something that sometimes people say you can't really teach work ethic, but if you develop that from an early age, I think you can. So I think developing a sense of, self-worth, feeling accomplishments, and hand in hand with that is you learn more about your losses than your wins. So how to deal with losing, what, went wrong, how to really dissect what didn't go great, last game, and how to improve upon that. It's the same way you can relate to surgery. Like, okay, maybe that didn't go perfectly, the patient's going to be fine, but, what can I do to make it better for the next person? So I think it just sets you up early on for a better mentality on how to deal with stress, because it's long hours, between work, school and everything else. To deal with that kind of stress, I think it kind of helps you organize yourself as well. Better time management skills, I'd say too.
Yeah, I think 100% time management. I think even going from high school then to college, I remember, taking classes. I remember when I was initially looking at different schools for soccer, some schools wouldn't let you go into or play soccer, do athletics if you were going into pre-med. And so that's kind of why I even partly chose Northern Iowa, because they let me do that, which is kind of silly to look at. I think anything's possible. But I remember, being on road trips, studying biochem in the dark on a bus and things like that. And then also just like waking up for 5 a.m. workouts and things like that. And then when residency rolls around and you're up at 4 or 5 a.m., I just remember thinking, hey, I'd rather be rounding than running laps right now. So it all comes around. But time management, I think, is the biggest thing, and just the work ethic.
So Mary, I'm curious about your experience as a coach. My kids played for Colorado Rush back in the day in Denver.
Okay, yeah.
And so the Rush in Iowa is similar thought processes and things. What was it like coaching kids, and how is that different from working with clerkships? Sure, there's a lot of analogies here.
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because I always wanted to, before I ever went into medicine, I always wanted to be a teacher growing up. So I think that kind of comes back around to now working with residents, in the future working with residents, and kind of that teaching aspect that I want to be involved with. But the coaching thing, all through, I played center D, which is a lot of like organizing the team and things like that. So I think coaching experiences always came up through high school and college, just doing camps and things like that. And so that was how I made some money while I was in med school. I was lucky to obviously go to DMU, and my family lives in Ankeny, Iowa, so right outside of Des Moines. So I lived at home, and then I just coached for the club that I grew up playing in. And so I coached, I think U8, U9, they were younger kids, but a lot of breaking skills down. And so it's still kind of the same idea. It was a lot looking back on that. I did that during like first year of med school, a lot to manage, but it was worth it. And then my whole family is pretty involved with the Iowa Rush and that whole program. Like I said, all my siblings play soccer too. 2 of my siblings still work and coach for the Iowa Rush currently. So we're pretty involved with all that.
That's so awesome.
Spectacular.
Joe always says all the interesting people have kind of a circuitous route to things, and it's true. Everybody's got a different story, and I think it's awesome.
Actually, can we piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Because John, you obviously are a legacy student, so that's or not student, you're a fellow, but legacy in the sense that you knew what podiatry was. Mary, how did you find out about podiatry?
So I knew, I think I wanted to go into like something involving sports medicine. And I think initially I was thinking just orthopedics. And it's funny because I was, taking the MCAT thinking I was going to go like MD, DO route, doing all of that. And I actually got injured my sophomore year. I tore my ACL, meniscus, all the things in my knee. And so just being in rehab, seeing all of that kind of going through that experience, I think kind of even transitioned to me into wanting to go into sports med even more. And so while I was starting to apply, I was looking at things, and I was looking at the DMU website and got more into podiatry. And then DMU visits Northern Iowa too often. And so that's how I kind of got into it. And then, like I said, my mentor, kind of a good family friend, had just gone through podiatry school. So I talked to her a little bit. And then I actually just kind of on a whim, after just briefly even shadowing someone, applied to DMU. And I was like, if I get in, I'm going, because I had a medical red shirt. And I was like, if I don't go, I'll go play another year of soccer. And I got in, and it was fate. So
That's awesome. And John, when your parents are involved in a career, it doesn't mean that you want to go into it or that you feel that strong sense of passion for it. What was your experience like? You may have known what it was, but when did you start to kind of gravitate towards like, oh, I kind of like this. I think I want to do it.
Well, I think going back, I think it was great that my parents didn't push it on me super hard. If my parents did, then maybe, at that age when you're a teenager or whatever, you're kind of rebellious. You kind of want to, advert away from whatever they're telling you to do. So they never really pushed me and said like, oh, you have to do this. So I think leaving it open as an option was helpful in the beginning. And then similar to Mary, I had, several breaks and, sprains throughout my football career. So dealing with like the loss of not being able to play and having to go through rehab, it's not fun sitting there on the sidelines. So if I could help somebody that's, wanting to get back on the field a little bit quicker, then I thought, why not do, foot and ankle?
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And talking to your mom, I know when we were talking before we started the recording that day, she's so proud of you, and both of you. It's great. So Joe, you want to do some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, but I have one more question.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Because these are young practitioners. What is it that you are most excited about in the next phase of your career? We'll start with you, John.
I would say not necessarily career-wise, but getting to be able to move back in with Mary, I think is probably the thing I'm most excited about. Actually,
I think just starting our lives together and just like buying a house. I mean, with all of this, obviously comes a lot of like moving, and I think obviously going into medicine, your careers are kind of pushed. Like all our friends back home that aren't in medicine, like we feel like have their life started, have a house, have kids, things like that. So, you put all that on the back burner for your career, which is fine. But I think we're just excited to, settle down and start practicing and start life a little bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of delayed gratification, not to say that the process wasn't fun along the way, but to actually get out and do it on our own and do it together in the same area is probably the thing I'm most excited for.
That's
and
excellent.
just doing cases on our own. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So John, did you become a Niner fan in the Bay Area?
Oh no, my roots are too deep with the Steelers. There's no chance.
I kind of knew that. That was a kind of
It was a poke. That's what it was.
Yeah. No, I'll cheer them on. They had a tough year this year, but I'm sympathetic towards them because Dr. Rush is a Niners fan. So, but no, I'm still Steelers through and through.
All right. Mary, did you become a Steeler fan too?
He's trying to get me to. I grew up a Packers fan, but I will say that John and I, like being in Pittsburgh, we go to a lot of games. We actually met and hung out with some of the players. So that has got us, I guess I cheer for the Steelers probably a little bit more now. But
there you go.
Yeah.
My wife and I grew up in Wisconsin. You can't take the Packer out of Wisconsin.
Exactly.
All right, very good. All right, let's do some rapid fire questions, Joe.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay, so you are both super competitive, and I was curious, what outside of podiatry, what kind of things do you do where that competitive nature comes out?
For me, it's golf. I love to get out and play golf with my friends. I think you got to have some kind of competitive outlet. So I think for me, that's golf, or either, just lifting weights to, keep my
Yeah, did you mean
sanity.
competitive with each other or just
Yeah, I did mean that initially. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Well, so no.
anything
Then-
that we do?
Yeah, anything.
Pretty much anything. He has to remind me it's not a competition.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know if you have a better example, John. I'm trying to think of one of the recent ones.
Not really.
So wait, so I have a question in that. So you guys are making dinner together, which I recognize maybe hasn't happened for a while, but let's say you're gonna make dinner together. Who gets to decide what's on the rest or what's on the menu?
Oh, I
That's-
just make it.
That's Mary. That's Mary.
But
Okay.
then I miss having him to do the dishes because that's usually my deal. I'll cook and he does the dishes. So
Yeah.
Team,
That's
right?
more
Like,
of a team,
alright.
team effort there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So, I'll think of one, but I can't get one right off the top of my head. I
Okay, I've
can't
got
really
one.
do the travel thing because Italy's wins.
I've got one.
Okay,
It's another food one.
Okay.
Well, kind of food. Wine or cocktails? We'll start with John.
ooh.
Cocktails. I do love old fashions. Those are pretty good.
All
I
right.
think lately I'd say wine.
All right. Well, and
Fair-
you're both
fair
with people that are phenomenal wine enthusiasts, so they could give both of you some good recommendations.
That
So-
is true.
Especially with Napa Valley just kind of being north of us. She's coming back out, or she came in October for my birthday. We went up to Napa Valley and did, some tours of the wineries up there, and she's coming back towards the end of April coming up. So looking forward to
And-
that.
Check out Sonoma too. Some good ones
Yeah.
in Sonoma.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
We have
sure
nothing on
Shannon
the
can give
books
you
yet.
some. Yeah, I'm sure he can give you some recommendations. So
Yeah.
John, next week at ACFS here in Phoenix. Are you both coming out for that?
Yeah.
Yes.
We actually fly out. Well, I fly out tomorrow. We're going to be at the SLUS conference in Seattle for
Oh.
Tuesday to Sunday. And then we fly out again to ACFAS. So we actually get to spend the next 2 weeks together. So
Yeah.
fantastic.
mhm.
So when will you be in Phoenix?
Wednesday to Sunday.
night.
Okay, very good. The reason I'm asking is I'm golfing with Kevin Smith on
Oh,
Tuesday.
Okay.
If you get in
you'll have to
early,
tell him hi.
well,
for
we got a
us.
spot open on our foursome. If you get in early, John, you're
Oh,
welcome to join.
maybe. I'll talk to you after the call's over.
Okay.
John's a pretty good golfer. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah, so is Kevin. Kevin's a great golfer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's say you guys are getting together, you're going out for dinner. What is your choice of what kind of restaurant do you go to?
Mm.
More often than not, let's say that.
That's a good question. I don't know, Mary.
I
mean,
love Mexican food, like after a long week, but I feel like it's
Mexican
hit or
food's always
miss.
good. Yeah, I mean, we kind of switch it
I
up.
kind of like
you know.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Sorry,
right,
yeah, I
so-
don't really have a direct answer. I mean, we
That's
love all food.
Yeah.
We like food. Insert
Yeah.
food here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Follow that. All right, so let's switch to experiences. What's one of the coolest experiences you've gotten to do thus far in your life? And it could be from your whole life. Something that was just like, this was the coolest thing I've ever done. We'll start with Mary this time.
Ooh, that's tough. Let me think.
Or you could do like a top 5 if you have lots of things, but
Obviously, going to Italy was amazing. That's probably one of the.
anything in particular about like something in Italy that was like, that was just such an amazing.
Honestly, of all
the Colosseum was fantastic, and the
I just
Amalfi-
like swimming in the Mediterranean Sea. I could do that all day. That was my
Beautiful.
highlight.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I think more recently I got to play Pebble Beach, so I was really excited about that.
Oh,
So
very good.
That's some of the most beautiful part of the country, I think. That 21-mile drive. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
outstanding. Just
we
really
stayed
beautiful.
in Carmel for 2 nights.
Yeah.
It's the cutest little town. It's, you know, all
Yeah.
mom and pop shops. It's awesome.
Very good. All right. Any last questions or comments, Joe?
No, I would just say, well, maybe could we end on advice to students and residents? Let's go. We'll start John this time.
So, like already podiatry students or just
Yeah.
general? Okay.
Ooh, well, let's do both. You could do
So
current and then
I would say
prospective.
for college students, you know, it's a really rewarding profession. I think it's something definitely worth considering, especially if you want to get out and do surgery. This is a great way to be able to do that. For podiatry students, I think, you know, get through the first 2 years and then just try and figure out what part of, you know, geographically you want to be at. And I think kind of go from there as far as programs go. You know, if you have a family, it's kind of a little bit difficult to uproot yourself and move. And then as far as residents go, I would say start the fellowship process early on. Like I said, you know, look at the deadlines, see what you're interested in, and definitely ask sooner than later, you know, to your mentors, like, hey, I'm interested in this. The sooner the better.
I love that.
And I would say, I guess, students like looking at the profession, like you said, you can have a great life with it. Obviously, I say that, and we're just starting, but it from based on what our mentors have told us. And then I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want to go into orthopedics, and they don't realize just in the field of podiatry and foot and ankle surgery, all that you can do. And there's really no limitations. You can take it in very different directions and kind of do what you want with it. So I think that's pretty cool, and people don't kind of see that right away. And then as far as residents and students, I would say just get as involved in things as you can, work hard. I mean, it seems drooling, the hours seem long, but it goes by so quickly. And honestly, the harder you work, the faster it goes, you know. It's the busy days that go in the blink of an eye. So I think just work as hard as you can.
John, your
Wonderful.
comment about get through that first 2 years is a recurring theme this time of the year, especially for our second years that are contemplating boards coming up. And I find myself being a cheerleader more than an academic, because the students are all so talented and they're so bright and they can do it, but it's an exhausting process. So I'm with you. Get through that first 2 years. That pass boards, that's your ticket to do what you want to do. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't even remember it, and it was only a few years ago.
There you go. Yeah. Well, thankfully, you don't have to take boards part 1 again.
Yeah, done with all that. Done with all the board exams.
Very good. All right. Well, we thank you both for joining us on Deeds Chat. Just such a wonderful discussion, and looking forward to following your careers. What just incredible opportunities you've been given and you've made for yourselves. And it's really going to be a wonderful profession for you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us. It was nice meeting you guys.
Oh, likewise. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, we'd love to get a 5-star rating or maybe a couple comments. If you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. Mary and John, Joe and I are going to send you a Deeds Chat cup. As a fellow, as a resident, there's no such thing as not enough caffeine for most people, but whatever, wine, whatever, you know.
You could put an old fashioned in there.
Yeah, anything you want.
It's kind of big, but
Dr. Burns was just drinking out of his this week in academics. So.
Oh, was he? All right on. I love it.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
He's
All
another
right.
amazing person. It's I'm through. I think you guys are in 2 of some of the best places in the country. So
Absolutely. Well, good luck to you. And until next week, everybody, cheers.
Right.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.